When playoff-caliber coaches like Sean McDermott talk about opponents, they usually stick to cliches. But this time McDermott broke from the script. He singled out Shedeur Sanders, not just as a talent to prepare for, but as a game-changer Cleveland should be embracing. That level of outside recognition is rare, and it makes Kevin Stefanski's downplaying of Sanders all the more baffling. When opposing coaches are offering more vocal support than your own, something is fundamentally broken. McDermott's remarks shine a light on the mechanics of NFL success: belief, structure, and the kind of veteran example that pushes young players forward.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
In praising both Garrett and White, McDermott made it clear how serious coaches treat serious talent. The Browns' internal doubt, game plan inconsistencies, and leadership vacuum tell a different story. If Sanders is to thrive, Cleveland must overhaul its approach, or risk being remembered not for who they drafted but for how they failed him. Sean McDermott doesn't usually speak out about other teams. But when the Buffalo Bills head coach publicly addressed Shedeur Sanders' situation in Cleveland, people stopped and listened. With zero hesitation, McDermott praised Sanders' impact on the Browns' offense, calling it more dangerous, more alive, and more difficult to prepare for. That alone would have raised eyebrows. But then came the subtle gut punch. McDermott indirectly exposed Cleveland's coaching culture by highlighting exactly what Shedeur isn't getting from his own team: support, structure, and respect. He didn't mention Kevin Stefanski by name, but the implication was crystal clear. While McDermott mapped out how elite organizations foster young quarterbacks through veteran mentorship and tight game planning, the contrast to the Browns couldn't have been more obvious. When asked about preparing for Sanders, McDermott didn't hold back. He said Shedeur's pocket presence was elite, his adaptability made the Browns a threat, and that facing him required serious adjustment. That's the kind of language you use when you're dealing with a franchise cornerstone. Now, flip that with Kevin Stefanski's latest comments about Sanders. Vague, minimal, non-committal. Not once has Stefanski spoken about Sanders with the kind of conviction that lets you know he believes in this kid. No detailing the game plan around him. No acknowledgement of how much Sanders has elevated the offense. Just neutral coach speak that feels more like damage control than support. And this isn't the first time. Stefanski's made a habit of dodging questions about Sanders' future or his leadership. He leans on phrases like "he's learning" or "he's getting better," but never pushes the narrative that Sanders is the present and future of the franchise. It's like Stefanski's scared to commit, and that's a problem when you've got a potential generational talent under center. Shedeur Sanders, for his part, hasn't fired back. He's been professional, poised, and focused on his play. In interviews he stays respectful. But you can read between the lines. This is a guy who's used to proving people wrong. He's been under pressure since high school and he doesn't crumble. But no matter how mentally tough you are, a young quarterback needs buy-in from the coaching staff. And the difference in tone is stark. When Shedeur talks about his development, he credits teammates, not the coaches. When asked about the offense, he talks about figuring things out with the guys, not implementing a system the staff gave him. That says a lot. It shows a player grinding through confusion and gaps in structure, because he doesn't have the full trust of the guy calling the plays. In recent games, Sanders has done more than just hold his own. Against the Bears, he navigated pressure, extended plays, and dropped dimes. His awareness in the pocket was far beyond rookie level. And yet, after that performance, there was no strong post-game praise from Stefanski. No push to the media saying, "This is our guy." Instead, it was back to the same muted tone, as if what Sanders just did wasn't franchise quarterback behavior. And here's where it gets frustrating. Fans see what Shedeur is doing on the field. They see the flashes, the composure, the leadership. But when the head coach won't validate that publicly, it creates doubt. Not just in the fan base but in the locker room. And that's the breeding ground for dysfunction, when the most important player in the building doesn't know if the coach even wants him to succeed. Stefanski's post-game interviews have become studies in evasion. Asked whether Sanders is the long-term solution, he shifts to competition or week-to-week evaluations. That's not how top franchises talk about top talent. McDermott, on the other hand, just spent all of his media availability talking about Shedeur's ability to extend plays and process defenses. That contrast is brutal. One coach is preparing to face Sanders like he's a star. The other coach can't even say his name without a disclaimer. If you're a rookie quarterback in this league, that kind of disconnect can be career. To make things worse, Stefanski's been openly complimentary about defensive stars like Myles Garrett. And rightfully so, Garrett is elite. But it draws a sharper line in the sand. When Stefanski talks about Garrett, there's passion, detail, admiration. When he talks about Sanders, it's sterile. The message becomes clear. Stefanski knows how to celebrate talent when he believes in it. And he's choosing not to send that same energy toward Shedeur. McDermott doesn't make that mistake. When he praises Trey White or Garrett as opponents, he breaks down the specific traits that make them great. It's about preparation, film study, and matching intensity. That level of detail signals respect. Stefanski's reluctance to do that for Sanders reads as doubt, or worse as Shedeur hasn't addressed the Stefanski drama directly. But in his last press conference he talked about controlling what he can control. He said he's focused on leading by example, earning trust, and staying locked in on the details. That's veteran mentality. But it's also coded language. When young players start talking about proving themselves every day, it usually means they feel like they're not being given what they've earned. And what he's earned is belief. Not just from teammates but from the top down. When the head coach is lukewarm, it forces the player to overcompensate. To do more, prove more, think more, when what they really need is stability. That brings us to the leadership structure in Cleveland. Stefanski and GM Andrew Berry have worked closely, but there's no public clarity on where Berry stands with Sanders either. The silence is deafening. It makes the lack of support look coordinated, like Sanders is being kept at arm's length by the very people who are supposed to build around him. Meanwhile, McDermott is over in Buffalo laying out a blueprint. Respect the talent, prepare with detail, support your leaders, and speak with purpose. That's how you build a system that lasts. Cleveland? Still fumbling with the manual while the clock ticks on a franchise quarterback's rookie. What's even more telling is how quickly Sanders gets sidelined for adjustments. When games go sideways, Stefanski has been more willing to tweak schemes or limit Sanders' reps instead of letting him play through adversity. That's how you stall development. Young quarterbacks grow by being trusted. Every yank from the game sends a louder message than any press conference could. We don't fully believe in you. McDermott again stands in contrast. He stuck with Josh Allen through ugly growing pains. He let him make mistakes, learn, and come out stronger. That's what real development looks like. The Browns, on the other hand, seem more focused on managing optics than building. At this point, the tape doesn't lie. There are enough moments from Sanders' NFL starts to prove he's not just surviving, he's making things happen. He's adjusting protections, reading blitzes, making pre-snap decisions. These are things veteran QBs still struggle with. And he's doing it with a staff that won't even go on record calling him the guy. So when Sean McDermott steps up and showers Sanders with respect, it hits different. It shines a spotlight on Cleveland's failure. The fact that the loudest endorsement Sanders has received came from an opposing head coach? That's embarrassing. And it might be the wake-up call ownership needs. Because here's the reality. Talent like Shedeur doesn't come around often. He has the arm, the mind, the leadership, and the work ethic. But none of that matters if the people at the top don't believe in him. McDermott made that clear. What separates winning cultures from losing ones isn't just talent. It's respect, preparation, and trust. If Cleveland wants any shot at keeping this ship afloat, they need to clean house. Stefanski's hesitancy, the organizational silence, the strategic sabotage, it's not just holding Sanders back. It's wasting the entire investment. The Browns don't need more film. They don't need more time. They need a head coach who actually believes in their quarterback. Until that happens, Sanders will keep doing what he's always done, proving himself. But the question isn't whether he's good enough. It's whether the Browns are smart enough to get out of their own way before someone else reaps the reward. If you've ever watched a team fumble the bag this hard, drop a comment. Hit like if you're tired of seeing talent get buried by bad leadership. And don't forget to subscribe, we're just getting started. At some point you have to ask, what exactly is Kevin Stefanski protecting? Because this level of guarded language, strategic deflection, and selective praise doesn't happen by accident. It's calculated. Whether it's about power, control, or just plain stubbornness, it's hard to see Stefanski's actions as anything but intentional. When coaches believe in their quarterback, they say it over and over again. Stefanski's refusal to do that isn't just about being cautious. It's about keeping Shedeur at arm's length. And the locker room sees it. Players aren't stupid. They know who's getting the real support and who's being tested every week like it's still tryouts. When the head coach can't commit to a rookie who's clearly outperforming expectations, it creates a fracture. Trust starts to erode, not just between the quarterback and coach but across the entire roster. That's why Sean McDermott's comments matter so much. He didn't just speak as an opponent. He spoke as a coach who understands how fragile the development of a young quarterback really is. When McDermott praised Shedeur, it wasn't lip service. He broke down the elements: timing, decision-making, game flow. That level of analysis only happens when a coach is watching tape with purpose. And he wasn't just evaluating Sanders as a threat. He acknowledged the leadership it takes to walk into an NFL huddle and command it as a rookie. That's rare. And when another team's head coach is giving your guy more credit than you are, that's an organizational red flag. Shedeur. In practice, Sanders has been nothing but locked in. He's first in, last out. Teammates say he's constantly on the tablet, asking questions, learning. And yet, when game time comes, Stefanski's scripts rarely reflect a belief in his QB's full skill set. Designed rollouts disappear. RPOs are shelved. It's as if Stefanski doesn't trust Sanders to execute what he's already shown he can handle. Meanwhile, the development reps that should be helping Sanders adapt are replaced with safe calls and quick throws. That kind of play calling doesn't elevate a young quarterback. It restricts him. It treats him like a placeholder instead of a franchise piece. And that kind of treatment is why other coaches feel the need to step in with public praise, because they see the disconnect. Shedeur hasn't flinched. Every time he's asked about Stefanski's vague comments or the lack of vocal support, he brings it back to the work. He says all the right things. He focuses on improving, taking coaching, building chemistry. But even in that professional tone, there's an undercurrent of something else. He knows what's happening. He's aware of the uphill climb that shouldn't be this steep. When a player constantly has to earn it without ever getting credit for earning it, the message becomes clear. No matter how well you play, you're still on trial. That's not development. That's sabotage dressed up as... And nothing exposed that more than the Browns' performance against the Lions. A team that came in with a shaky defense left looking dominant. Why? Because Cleveland didn't scheme around their own quarterback. They hung Shedeur out to dry with bad protection, zero adjustments, and a complete lack of urgency in play calling. Fans watched Sanders take hits he didn't need to take. They watched him try to scramble for first downs while the receivers ran routes that didn't fit the coverage. And the worst part? Stefanski's post-game takeaway was about execution, not scheme. That's deflection at its... During that game, Shedeur showed toughness. He took big hits and got up. He threw strikes under pressure. He tried to rally a flat offense that looked like it was running in reverse. But you could see it in his face, he was doing it alone. There was no rhythm, no momentum, no plan to build him up. That game should have been a showcase. Instead, it was a case study in how not to support a rookie quarterback. McDermott saw it too. When asked later about that game, he talked about how Sanders kept the team in it despite everything going wrong. That's the kind of thing you expect from your own coach, not the one across the field. Contrast that with how Stefanski handles Myles Garrett. When Garrett has a big game, Stefanski's at the podium detailing each sack, each disruption, each moment of leadership. He builds the narrative. He puts Garrett's greatness on display. And that's what a head coach is supposed to do, elevate his stars. So why can't he do the same for Sanders? That's what McDermott's words really exposed. Not just a lack of support, but selective support. Stefanski knows how to back his players. He just doesn't want to do it for this. Their body language on the sideline is awkward. There's no warmth. No quarterback-head coach chemistry. Stefanski's more engaged with the play sheet than the player. And Sanders, for his part, just focuses on the next series. He's not asking for a hug. He's asking for consistency. When your quarterback doesn't feel empowered, it affects everything: the tempo, the confidence, the command. And it's painfully obvious this relationship lacks the kind of connection that successful QB coach duos have. At some point, that breaks things beyond. Even going back to preseason, the writing was on the wall. After Sanders balled out in limited reps, reporters expected Stefanski to gush. Instead, he said Sanders was solid. Just solid. No excitement, no vision, no declaration of trust. That tone has never shifted. Not after wins, not after big throws, not after moments where Sanders carried the team. You can only downplay greatness for so long before it looks personal. And whether it is or isn't doesn't even matter. The perception alone can fracture a locker room. The camera never lies. Every game photo tells the same story. Sanders playing his heart out, scanning the field, directing teammates, taking hits, standing tall. He looks like a franchise quarterback because he plays like one. The only thing missing from the frame is his head coach standing beside him. McDermott sees what Cleveland refuses to say out loud. And that's why his comments hit like a sledgehammer. They didn't just praise Sanders. they indicted the Browns' leadership without even naming names. Because when a coach on the outside shows more belief than the coach on the inside, that's not just commentary. That's a warning. Cleveland is playing with fire. They're holding back a quarterback who could change the future of their franchise just because the people in charge are too stubborn or too scared to admit he's already better than they expected. And let's be clear, teams don't get many shots like this. Quarterbacks with Shedeur's tools, poise, and leadership don't fall into your lap every year. If you get one, you better build the system around him fast. Because if you don't, someone else will. If the Browns don't course correct now, if they don't clean out the coaching hesitation and finally back their quarterback with action, not just words, they'll be remembered as the team that had everything they needed and let it rot from the inside. Browns vs. San Francisco 49ers. It was supposed to be a showcase. A chance for Sanders to prove he could hold his own against one of the league's toughest defenses. Instead, it became another chapter in the Browns' ongoing saga of dysfunction. The Browns walked in with no clear offensive identity. While San Francisco came in ready to test Sanders' composure and timing, Cleveland did little to help their rookie. Poor protection, no run balance, and conservative play calling left Sanders exposed. Even when he made plays under pressure, the system never adjusted to build momentum. It was as if the coaching staff expected failure and called the game accordingly. And still, Sanders found ways to compete. He read the defense, adjusted protections, and hit his checkdowns under heat. He showed that rare quality you can't coach, poise. But it wasn't enough to overcome a scheme working against him. What should have been a growth moment turned into another example of Cleveland setting their quarterback up to fail. He didn't flinch, but he also didn't get any help. After the game, McDermott wasn't even involved, but he still brought up how difficult it is to face Sanders. He saw something Cleveland. Stefanski, on the other hand, gave one of his classic neutral answers. "We'll review the tape," he said. No breakdown of Sanders' bright moments. No comment on his ability to manage the game. Just another shrug as if nothing stood out. It's a pattern now, one that's impossible to ignore. And this isn't about coddling a rookie. It's about recognizing excellence when you see it. Stefanski has done this dance long enough to know the power of public affirmation. But for some reason he refuses to extend that to Sanders. At this point, the silence says more than words ever could. Meanwhile, when Lamar Jackson struggled early in his career, he had coaches who doubled down on belief. They didn't shrink the playbook, they expanded it. They put the ball in his hands and let him make mistakes, trusting that his growth would pay off. That kind of support changed everything. Lamar went from risky pick to MVP because the team got behind him. That's what's missing in Cleveland. And it's why McDermott's praise lands so hard. It reminds everyone what belief in a quarterback actually looks like. And if you want to see how far the Browns are from that model, just look at what happens every time Sanders has a rough drive. The leash is tight. One bad series and Stefanski starts calling plays like he's trying not to lose instead of trying to win. Sanders ends up sidelined, not always literally but functionally. The offense turns to screen passes and handoffs. They don't let him stretch the field, don't let him work through it. It's a passive-aggressive way of saying, "We don't trust you." But here's the part that stings. When Stefanski gets asked directly about his belief in Sanders, he never answers cleanly. It's always "we're evaluating," or "we're focused on the next game." That would make sense, if Sanders wasn't performing. But he is. He's doing more with less, showing the kind of maturity you can't teach. And still, the coach who should be hyping him up seems more concerned with managing a narrative than building his quarterback. It's hard not to read that as, go watch the tape. Week after week, Sanders is making NFL-caliber plays. Tight window throws. Blitz recognition. Audible adjustments. This is not a rookie surviving. This is a young quarterback thriving in spite of the situation around him. That's what McDermott saw. That's what every defensive coordinator preparing for Cleveland is seeing. And that's what Stefanski continues to downplay, as if admitting Sanders is thriving would somehow cost him control. Even back in training camp, it was clear that Sanders had it. His reads, his leadership, his chemistry with receivers, it was all ahead of schedule. Reporters asked Stefanski about it and he brushed it off. Said it was early. Said they had time. That time has come and gone. Now Sanders is delivering and the support still isn't there. At this point, the only logical conclusion is that Stefanski never wanted him. And rather than adapt, he's doubling down, sticking to his vision even if it means suffocating the one player who could save his job. If you're watching this and thinking, how does this keep happening in Cleveland? You're not alone. Drop your thoughts below. Hit like if you're with Shedeur. Subscribe if you're tired of watching the same script ruin great players. There's more coming. And you don't want to miss what happens next.